Lift your voice wherever you are. This is not an ordinary moment. This is a divine appointment. There are times in a believer's life when the issue is not effort, intelligence, or persistence. The issue is alignment. Many people are tired not because they are weak, but because they are pushing against a door that requires divine authorization to open. Tonight we come before the God who opens ways where there seems to be none. The God who makes rivers in deserts and pathways in wildernesses. The God who specializes in sudden turnarounds. As you pray, understand this truth. When God opens a way, no man can close it. And when he closes a door, no amount of strength can force it open. Father, in the name of Jesus, we thank you. We honor you as the Ancient of Days, the one who was, who is, and who is to come. We acknowledge that you are the keeper of times and seasons. You are the God who orders steps, not just destinations. Tonight we declare that this Wednesday is not ordinary. It is loaded with divine possibilities. There are moments in a believer's life when effort seems sincere, prayers seem consistent, yet progress appears slow. In such seasons, it is important to understand that God is not absent, silent, or indifferent. Divine timing is one of the greatest mysteries of faith, and many destinies are delayed not because God is unwilling, but because timing has not yet aligned. When God works, he does not only consider the destination, he considers the maturity, the preparation, and the spiritual capacity of the one receiving the blessing. Many people mistake delay for rejection, but in the economy of heaven, delay is often a tool of refinement. God is intentional with timing because premature access can destroy what is meant to bless. There are doors that look attractive, but entering them too early can bring unnecessary pain, pride, or loss. That is why God, in his mercy, sometimes withholds what we ask for until our character, discernment, and spiritual strength can sustain it. Divine timing also teaches dependence. When answers come instantly, the heart may forget God quickly. But when a believer waits, something deep is formed within the spirit. Waiting teaches patience, humility, and trust. It strips a person of self-sufficiency and replaces it with reliance on God's wisdom. This is why scripture says, those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. Waiting is not weakness. Waiting is preparation. There are seasons when God allows silence, not because he has nothing to say, but because he wants to teach you how to listen. In those quiet seasons, God is aligning circumstances, people, and unseen forces. While it looks like nothing is happening physically, much is happening spiritually. Heaven is arranging outcomes that eyes have not seen yet. What feels like delay on earth is often coordination in the heavens. Understanding divine timing also helps a believer overcome frustration and comparison. Many people become discouraged because they measure their lives by the progress of others. But destiny is not a competition. God deals with individuals uniquely. What another person can handle at a certain time may crush someone else. God knows the weight your destiny carries, and he prepares you accordingly. Your timing is custom designed for your assignment. God allows seasons of delay to heal inner wounds. Some doors remain closed because God is more interested in healing the heart than rewarding the effort. There are blessings that will amplify unresolved pain if released too soon. So God pauses the process, not to punish, but to protect. He wants you whole before he takes you high. He wants you stable before he gives you speed. Divine timing is also connected to obedience. Sometimes delays are invitations to examine alignment. God may be waiting for a correction, a surrender, or a step of obedience. Not all delays are attacks. Some are instructions in disguise. When alignment comes, acceleration often follows. One moment of obedience can compress years of delay into a single breakthrough. It is important to understand that God's timing is not slow, it is precise. What looks late to human understanding is often right on schedule in the spirit. God does not rush because he sees the end from the beginning. He knows when doors should open, when battles should end, and when favor should speak. When the appointed time arrives, nothing can stop it. This understanding brings peace. When a believer truly trusts divine timing, anxiety loses its grip. Their heart rests, knowing that God cannot forget, overlook, or mismanage destiny. Faith is strengthened when you realize that your life is not random. Every delay has meaning. Every closed door has a purpose. Every waiting season is shaping something eternal. As you pray, let this truth settle in your spirit. God is never late. The delay you are experiencing is not the end of the story. It is a chapter of preparation. When the way opens, it will open with clarity, stability, and divine backing. And when it does, you will look back and realize that God's timing was not only perfect, it was necessary. Prayer is not a religious routine or a spiritual habit meant to comfort the mind. Prayer is a legal and spiritual system designed by God to realign the affairs of men with the intentions of heaven. When prayer is engaged correctly, it does not merely ask God for help. It positions the believer within the flow of divine purpose. Many lives remain misaligned, not because God has spoken wrongly, but because prayer has not been used as a tool of alignment. Every destiny has an original blueprint in the spirit. Before opportunities appear physically, they exist spiritually. Prayer is the bridge that connects what has been ordained in heaven to what must manifest on earth. Without prayer, people often pursue good things outside of divine timing or chase open doors that lead away from their assignment. Prayer corrects direction. It recenters the heart and restores spiritual sensitivity. One of the greatest dangers in life is movement without alignment. Activity does not always equal progress. A person can be busy, yet drifting away from purpose. Prayer slows you down enough to hear God, discern his will, and recognize when a door is truly from him. Through prayer, motives are purified, ambitions are refined, and selfish desires are surrendered. What remains is a heart that can carry divine instruction. Prayer also repositions authority. In the realm of the spirit, nothing significant happens without authorization. Jesus himself said that whatever is bound or loosed on earth is first recognized in heaven. Prayer gives the believer legal access to enforce what God has already permitted. Many sealed doors are not opened by effort, but by spiritual authority expressed through prayer. When prayer is absent, authority remains dormant. Through consistent prayer, the believer becomes spiritually aligned to recognize seasons. There are times when God says move and times when he says wait. Without prayer, people often move prematurely or remain stagnant when God is calling them forward. Prayer sharpens discernment. It helps the believer recognize divine cues and respond accurately. This is how mistakes are minimized and destiny is preserved. Prayer also aligns the inner man. Many people are externally prepared but internally unstable. Prayer works on the heart before it works on circumstances. It heals wounds, dismantles pride, and builds humility. Alignment is not only about location or opportunity, it is about condition. A misaligned heart can sabotage even the greatest opportunity. Prayer ensures that the inner world is ready for the outer world. When a believer prays, resistance is confronted. Misalignment attracts unnecessary battles. But when prayer realigns destiny, battles that are not assigned lose their power. Prayer does not remove all challenges, but it ensures that the challenges you face are purposeful and productive. There is a difference between suffering that refines and suffering that distracts. Prayer separates the two. Prayer also restores confidence in God's voice. Many people doubt because they are disconnected. Prayer reestablishes intimacy. The more a believer prays, the clearer God's voice becomes. This clarity brings boldness. Decisions are made with peace, not fear. When alignment is restored, confusion exits naturally. Another powerful dimension of prayer is that it invites divine partnership. God does not force his will on people. He responds to invitation. Prayer is that invitation. It tells heaven that you are ready to cooperate. When God sees a heart yielded in prayer, he releases guidance, strength, and favor. Alignment attracts assistance. Finally, prayer aligns destiny with eternity. It lifts the believer above temporary pressures and earthly distractions. It reminds the heart that life is bigger than immediate needs. When prayer becomes central, perspective is restored. The believer begins to value purpose over convenience and obedience over comfort. This is why prayer opens sealed doors. Not because it manipulates God, but because it aligns the believer. When alignment happens, doors open naturally. Paths become clear. Resistance weakens. The way forward reveals itself. Prayer is not a last option. It is the master key that brings the soul, the spirit, and destiny into agreement with God's original design. There are forces that operate beyond what the natural eye can see. And one of the realities every believer must understand is that progress is not always resisted physically. Many times, the greatest opposition to destiny is unseen. These are not imaginary barriers. They are spiritual resistances that manifest as repeated frustration, unexplained stagnation, closed doors, and cycles that seem impossible to break. Understanding this truth is not to create fear, but to awaken spiritual intelligence. Life is governed by laws, both natural and spiritual. Just as gravity affects the physical world, spiritual laws influence outcomes in ways many people do not immediately recognize. When a person is called to move forward, opposition often arises, not because the path is wrong, but because the destination is valuable. Resistance is frequently proof that something significant is ahead. The enemy does not fight empty futures. Breaking spiritual resistance begins with awareness. Many believers fight symptoms instead of causes. They address surface level problems, finances, relationships, opportunities, without confronting the underlying spiritual constraints. As a result, victories are temporary. When the root is untouched, the problem returns in a different form. Prayer brings discernment, and discernment reveals what must be confronted. Unseen barriers can take many forms. Sometimes they are patterns passed down through generations, limitations that seem to follow a family line. Other times they are the result of wrong spiritual alignments, disobedience, or prolonged compromise. In some cases, they arise simply because a believer is transitioning to a higher level and resistance is attempting to slow momentum. Not every barrier is a punishment. Some are indicators of promotion. Spiritual resistance thrives where authority is not exercised. Many believers have power, but they do not use it. They hope, wish, and wait, but do not stand. Authority must be enforced. When a believer prays with understanding, prayer becomes confrontation. It is not noise, it is legislation in the spirit. When authority is exercised correctly, resistance weakens and eventually collapses. Fear is one of the tools that unseen resistance uses. Fear magnifies obstacles and minimizes faith. It whispers that nothing will change, that this cycle is permanent, that effort is useless. But fear has no power of its own. It survives on ignorance. When truth is introduced, fear loses its grip. Prayer floods the heart with truth and restores confidence in God's power. Another common barrier is spiritual fatigue. Resistance is often prolonged to wear down perseverance. When people grow tired, they lower their guard. They begin to accept what they should confront. They normalize delay. This is dangerous because what is tolerated today becomes permanent tomorrow. Strength must be renewed intentionally. Prayer is how spiritual stamina is restored. It reminds the soul that quitting is not an option. Breaking unseen barriers also requires consistency. Resistance rarely disappears after one moment of prayer. Persistence is a sign of faith. Every time you pray, you apply pressure. And in the spirit, sustained pressure always produces results. Walls do not fall because of noise, but because of obedience and consistency. When prayer becomes a lifestyle, resistance has no place to hide. It is important to understand that some barriers exist because access has increased. When God prepares to open a new way, opposition often intensifies briefly. This is not the time to retreat. It is the time to stand firmer. Many people turn back at the edge of breakthrough because resistance convinces them they are failing when in fact they are close. Unseen barriers are also dismantled through alignment with God's will. Resistance loses power when a believer walks in obedience. Disobedience gives resistance legal ground. Obedience removes that ground. This is why prayer must be accompanied by surrender. Authority flows through alignment. When your will and God's will agree, opposition has no defense. As resistance breaks, peace returns first, then clarity, then movement. The atmosphere changes. What once felt heavy becomes light. What once felt confusing becomes simple. This is how spiritual victories often manifest. Not always dramatically, but undeniably. Doors begin to open naturally. Conversations shift. Opportunities appear without strain. Breaking spiritual resistance is not about fighting darkness obsessively. It is about enforcing light consistently. Darkness does not argue with light. It leaves. When prayer is engaged with understanding, barriers collapse, chains fall, and paths open. The unseen world responds to spiritual authority. And when authority is exercised, destiny moves forward without apology. Obedience is one of the most misunderstood yet powerful principles in the journey of faith. Many people desire open doors, divine speed, and supernatural access, but few recognize that obedience is the currency that grants entrance. Obedience is not merely compliance, it is alignment in action. It is the visible proof that a believer trusts God more than personal logic, comfort, or fear. There are doors that prayer alone will not open until obedience is applied. This is not because prayer lacks power, but because God's systems are designed to respond to alignment. Obedience positions a believer within the boundaries of divine authorization. When a person obeys God, they are not forcing a result. They are cooperating with a process already established in heaven. Many delays in life are not caused by spiritual attack, but by partial obedience. People often obey selectively, accepting instructions that feel safe while avoiding those that demand sacrifice. However, partial obedience produces partial results. God's instructions are interconnected. Ignoring one aspect can stall the entire outcome. Obedience must be complete to be effective. One reason obedience is difficult is because it often contradicts human reasoning. God may ask for steps that appear illogical, uncomfortable, or risky. This is intentional. Obedience trains the believer to walk by faith rather than sight. It shifts dependence from intellect to trust. When obedience becomes a habit, fear loses its influence because the believer learns that God's wisdom exceeds human understanding. Obedience also refines character. God is not only interested in where you are going, but in who you are becoming along the way. Some doors are delayed because character is still being shaped. Obedience produces humility, patience, discipline, and submission. Qualities required to sustain access once it is granted. Without these, open doors can become destructive instead of beneficial. Walking in obedience also creates spiritual sensitivity. When a believer consistently obeys, their ability to hear God improves. The voice of God becomes clearer and confusion diminishes. This sensitivity allows for quicker responses to divine instructions, resulting in acceleration. Many people miss opportunities not because God did not speak, but because they were not attentive enough to recognize his voice. Obedience invites divine backing. When God sees obedience, he commits his power to support the outcome. This is why some people succeed with little effort, while others struggle endlessly. It is not always strength or skill that makes the difference. It is alignment. Obedience ensures that heaven is involved in earthly efforts. When heaven backs an action, resistance weakens. Another powerful dimension of obedience is protection. God's instructions are not only meant to advance you, but to preserve you. Some closed doors are acts of mercy. Obedience keeps a believer from entering environments that would cause harm. What looks like restriction today may be rescue tomorrow. Obedience saves time, pain, and regret. Obedience also activates divine access to people and places. Many relationships, opportunities, and resources are unlocked through simple acts of obedience. A single instruction followed at the right time can open networks that years of effort could not. God often uses obedience to reposition a believer strategically, placing them where favor can locate them naturally. It is important to understand that obedience does not guarantee an absence of challenges. However, it ensures that challenges are purposeful. When walking in obedience, even setbacks contribute to progress. Nothing is wasted. Every experience adds value because it is under divine supervision. As obedience becomes a lifestyle, frustration decreases and confidence increases. The believer stops striving and starts trusting. Decisions are made with peace. Steps are taken with assurance. Doors open without manipulation. Paths become clear without confusion. Obedience is the master key to supernatural access. It aligns the believer with divine timing, releases authority, and invites favor. When obedience speaks, resistance listens. When obedience is practiced consistently, doors open naturally and the way forward becomes undeniable. Grace is not merely an abstract concept or a theological idea. Grace is divine empowerment made available to human weakness. Many people assume strength comes from discipline, experience, or willpower. But in the spiritual journey, lasting strength flows from grace. Grace is God's ability walking through a yielded life. Without grace, even the most gifted person will eventually collapse under pressure. With grace, ordinary people accomplish extraordinary assignments. There are seasons in life when effort alone is no longer enough. These are moments when challenges exceed personal capacity. It is in such seasons that grace becomes essential. Grace does not remove responsibility, but it supplies the power to fulfill it. When a believer recognizes the limits of human strength and leans into grace, frustration gives way to peace and endurance replaces exhaustion. Grace also supplies wisdom. Many battles are lost not because of lack of effort, but because of wrong decisions. Wisdom is the ability to apply knowledge correctly, and grace sharpens discernment. Through grace, a believer sees beyond appearances and understands the implications of choices. Wisdom preserved by grace prevents costly mistakes and redirects paths before damage occurs. Receiving grace requires humility. Pride resists grace, but humility attracts it. When a believer acknowledges dependence on God, grace flows freely. This humility is not weakness, it is alignment. It positions the heart to receive instruction, correction, and direction. Grace settles where surrender is practiced. Grace also brings stability. Life has a way of applying pressure that exposes weak foundations. Grace strengthens the inner man so that external storms do not cause internal collapse. It allows the believer to remain calm in chaos, hopeful in delay, and steady in uncertainty. Stability is a sign of grace at work. In moments of confusion, grace becomes guidance. God does not leave his people directionless. Grace clarifies priorities and simplifies decisions. Instead of overwhelming the mind with options, grace highlights the right step. It replaces anxiety with focus and indecision with confidence. Grace empowers consistency. Many people start well but struggle to continue. Grace supplies endurance. It keeps the heart engaged even when results are slow. Consistency sustained by grace outlasts enthusiasm driven by emotion. This is why those who rely on grace often finish strong. Grace also restores after failure. Mistakes can drain strength and damage confidence. Grace does not excuse failure, but it redeems it. It lifts the believer, realigns focus, and provides courage to continue. Without grace, failure becomes a prison. With grace, failure becomes a lesson. Another dimension of grace is supernatural assistance. Grace attracts divine help beyond human capability. God begins to do what effort could not accomplish alone. Favor increases, burdens lighten, opportunities arise unexpectedly. Grace shifts outcomes without strain. Grace does not mean absence of discipline. Rather, it empowers discipline. When grace is active, obedience becomes easier and spiritual practices become life-giving instead of burdensome. Grace turns duty into desire and routine into relationship. As grace increases, vision becomes clearer. The believer begins to see life through the lens of purpose rather than pressure. Strength is renewed daily. Wisdom is accessed continually, and direction remains steady. Grace sustains both the journey and the destination. Grace is the reason progress continues when circumstances say stop. It is the reason faith survives pressure. It is the reason doors open at the right time. When grace is received and stewarded, strength is renewed, wisdom is released, and direction becomes unmistakable. Divine favor is not luck, coincidence, or human preference. It is a spiritual advantage granted by God that causes people, systems, and circumstances to cooperate with your destiny. Many believers work hard yet remain stuck because effort without favor produces exhaustion. Favor does not replace labor, but it multiplies results. When favor is active, progress becomes lighter, doors open with less resistance, and help appears at critical moments. God never designed anyone to walk alone. Destiny is too complex to be fulfilled in isolation. This is why helpers are a vital part of divine design. Helpers are individuals strategically positioned by God to assist, recommend, support, instruct, or connect you to the next phase of your assignment. These helpers may not always know they are helping you, but when favor is active, God influences their hearts toward you. Many people pray for open doors, but ignore the fact that most doors open through people. Access to opportunities, platforms, resources, and information is often controlled by relationships. Favor works invisibly to align you with the right people at the right time. When favor speaks, conversations change. Where your name was previously ignored, it begins to carry weight. Activating divine favor begins with alignment. Favor rests where obedience and humility are present. Pride repels helpers because it communicates independence from God. Humility attracts assistance because it acknowledges need and dependence. God entrusts favor to those who will not abuse it. A humble heart can be promoted safely. Favor is also activated through prayer. Prayer invites God into human affairs and gives him permission to influence outcomes. When a believer prays intentionally, God begins to orchestrate meetings, opportunities, and encounters that could not be planned naturally. What looks like coincidence is often prayer answered quietly. Another important truth is that helpers are assigned according to seasons. Not everyone who helps you in one season will follow you into the next. Some helpers are transitional, some are instructional, and some are destiny defining. Discernment is required to recognize who belongs where. Favor brings helpers, but wisdom sustains relationships. Sometimes helpers are delayed because character is still being refined. God may withhold certain relationships until maturity develops. This is not punishment, it is protection. The wrong attitude can destroy valuable connections. Favor does not only connect, it preserves. Divine favor also works by repositioning. Sometimes the reason help has not come is because location is wrong, emotionally, spiritually, or physically. God may shift you into environments where helpers are naturally present. When alignment happens, help flows without struggle. It is important to understand that helpers are not saviors. They are instruments. God remains the source. When a believer idolizes helpers, favor withdraws. But when helpers are honored without replacing God, favor remains stable. Balance is essential. Favor also causes advocacy. God can raise people who speak for you when you are not present. They defend your name, recommend you, and open conversations on your behalf. This dimension of favor saves time and reduces struggle. One recommendation from the right person can achieve what years of effort could not. However, favor must be stewarded. When helpers appear, gratitude, honor, and integrity must follow. Dishonor shuts doors quickly. Many people lose helpers not because of lack of favor, but because of poor stewardship of relationships. How you treat helpers determines how long favor remains active. There are also moments when God himself becomes the helper when human help fails. Divine favor ensures that lack of human assistance never stops destiny. God can use unusual channels. He can accelerate processes supernaturally. He can bypass systems entirely. Favor makes a way even when none is visible. As favor increases, opposition may also increase. This is because favor distinguishes. But favor provides protection. God shields what he promotes. Helpers may also come in the form of wisdom, warnings, or timely instructions that prevent costly errors. Not all help looks dramatic. Some help saves you quietly. Ultimately, activating divine favor and helpers means trusting God's orchestration. When favor is at work, striving reduces. Anxiety fades. The journey becomes purposeful rather than pressured. You realize that God is actively involved in your progress. When favor speaks, delays shorten. When helpers arrive, burdens lighten. When God takes responsibility for your connections, destiny moves forward with speed and stability. Favor is not random, it is intentional. And when it is activated, the path ahead opens with clarity and grace. Stepping into your ordained way is not a single dramatic moment. It is the result of consistent alignment, faith, and spiritual authority expressed over time. Every believer has a path designed by God, a way that carries purpose, peace, and divine backing. Yet many people remain near their destiny without fully entering it because they hesitate, doubt, or underestimate the authority they carry. Faith is the force that moves a believer from preparation into possession. It is not wishful thinking or emotional excitement. It is confidence rooted in the character of God. Faith accepts that God has gone ahead to prepare the way, even when the path is not yet visible. When a believer steps forward in faith, the way responds. God does not reveal the entire path at once. He reveals enough for obedience. Walking in your ordained way requires courage. Fear often stands at the entrance of destiny. Fear exaggerates risks and minimizes God's faithfulness. But fear does not mean the absence of faith. It means faith is being challenged. Authority is exercised when a believer moves despite fear. Each step taken in faith weakens fear's influence and strengthens confidence in God. Spiritual authority is not about dominance. It is about alignment. Authority flows from knowing who you are and who God is. When a believer understands that they are sent, not self-appointed, boldness increases. You no longer beg for permission to advance. You move with confidence, knowing heaven backs your steps. Authority speaks through obedience, consistency, and conviction. One reason many people struggle to step into their ordained way is attachment to familiarity. Comfort zones feel safe, but they limit growth. God's way often requires leaving what is known to embrace what is promised. Letting go is difficult, but holding on to the wrong season can delay the right one. Faith releases the past to receive the future. Walking in your ordained way also requires endurance. The path is not always easy or quick. There will be moments of testing, moments when progress seems slow. Endurance is the ability to remain faithful under pressure. It is sustained by hope and strengthened by purpose. Those who endure do not just arrive, they arrive mature. Authority grows through obedience. Every instruction followed strengthens spiritual confidence. Every step taken reinforces identity. As obedience accumulates, authority increases. This is why consistency matters. Small acts of obedience prepare the believer for greater responsibility. Destiny is entered gradually, not rushed. Another critical aspect of stepping into your ordained way is discernment. Not every opportunity is a calling. Not every open door leads to the right place. Authority includes the wisdom to say no. Discernment protects focus and prevents distraction. When a believer is clear about their assignment, they move with precision. As the believer walks forward, opposition may arise. This does not mean the path is wrong. Resistance often confirms direction. Authority is tested under pressure. When pressure comes, the believer must stand firm, not retreat. Authority grows when it is exercised. Each victory builds momentum. Peace is one of the greatest confirmations of walking in your ordained way. Even in difficulty, there is an inner assurance that you are where you are supposed to be. This peace anchors the soul and stabilizes decisions. It silences doubt and strengthens resolve. Walking in your ordained way also brings fulfillment. Fulfillment is deeper than success. It is the satisfaction of knowing your life aligns with purpose. Even sacrifices feel meaningful because they contribute to something eternal. This fulfillment sustains joy even when outcomes are delayed. As faith is exercised and authority is enforced, progress becomes evident. Steps align, resources appear, and clarity increases. What once felt confusing becomes focused. What once felt heavy becomes manageable. This is the reward of alignment. Stepping into your ordained way is a journey of trust. Trust in God's leading. Trust in his timing. Trust in the authority he has placed within you. When you move with faith and authority, the way responds. Paths open. Destiny unfolds. And the life God designed becomes the life you walk in. Boldly, confidently, and with divine assurance. As we come to the close of this moment of prayer and reflection, one truth must settle firmly in the heart. God is intentional about your life. Nothing you have experienced has been wasted, and nothing ahead of you is accidental. Every delay, every closed door, every season of waiting has been part of a divine process designed to prepare you, strengthen you, and align you for what is next. This prayer is not an ending, it is a turning point, a declaration that you will no longer measure your journey by frustration or fear, but by faith and obedience. Tonight you have acknowledged God as the keeper of your times and seasons, and in doing so, you have released control into hands far wiser than your own. That surrender itself is a form of victory. As you rise from this place of prayer, carry this confidence. The way ahead is not blocked. It may not yet be fully visible, but it is already arranged. God does not open doors halfway. When he opens a way, it comes with clarity, peace, and divine backing. What you could not force through effort, he will release through alignment. Remember that progress does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it begins quietly, in renewed strength, restored hope, and fresh courage. Do not despise these subtle signs. They are evidence that heaven has responded. Stand firm in obedience, remain consistent in prayer, and guard your heart against doubt. The days ahead will require faith, but not blind faith. Faith rooted in assurance. Walk forward with confidence, knowing that God goes before you, stands with you, and follows after you. The season has shifted. The burden has lifted. The way is opening. And as you move, you will testify not only that God answered, but that he answered perfectly.